What if one city, not a capital, not a massive fortress, became the place where Putin's greatest military dream fell completely apart? That is exactly what happened in Kupiansk, and the consequences are far bigger than most people realize. If this kind of deep, honest breakdown of the war is what you've been looking for, hit that like button right now. Subscribe so you never miss an update, and share this with someone who needs to understand what's really happening on the ground. It takes 2 seconds, and it means everything to this channel. Now let's get into it. For months, something was quietly taking shape inside the Kremlin's most guarded war rooms. Russian military planners had been working on what they believed was their smartest, most devastating move yet. The idea was simple in theory, but enormous in scale. Russia would stabilize its eastern front, hold the line, and then redirect a massive force northward through the Chernihiv forests, straight toward Kiev. This wasn't a desperate plan. It was supposed to be a calculated, overwhelming strike. And to make it happen, Russia began assembling something truly alarming: a shadow army of nearly 100,000 troops. These weren't low-quality conscripts thrown together in a hurry. The Kremlin was committing serious military resources. The 6th Combined Arms Army from the Leningrad Military District, the 1st Guards Tank Army from the Moscow Military District, units equipped with T-90M tanks, Russia's most advanced armor, trained contract soldiers, veterans of earlier campaigns. The plan, at least on paper, looked dangerous: destabilize Ukraine's east, force Ukraine to stretch its defenses, then hit the north with everything. 2 fires burning at once, Ukraine squeezed from multiple directions, and suddenly, Kiev is within reach. That was the vision. That was what Putin was betting on. But here's where it starts to fall apart. Ukrainian military intelligence didn't just suspect something was coming. They had already identified the specific weaknesses in Russia's plan. They knew where the pressure points were. And rather than sitting back and simply bracing for the storm, Ukraine decided to act first. And they chose Kupiansk. Kupiansk is a city in the Kharkiv region of eastern Ukraine, sitting near the Oskol River. Russia had occupied parts of it, and had been using it as a military foothold for months. Buildings had been converted into bunkers. Underground passages had been reinforced. Russian soldiers had dug themselves in deep, treating the city as a long-term position. But Ukraine had been watching, planning, waiting for the right moment. That moment came in May. The operation that followed was not a chaotic assault. It was precise, coordinated, and patient. The Kharkiv National Guard Brigade moved into the heart of Kupiansk as the primary strike force. Mechanized brigades connected to the 10th Army Corps positioned themselves on the eastern bank of the Oskil River. This was not to attack blindly, but to cut off any Russian escape routes. If Russian forces tried to flee, they would have nowhere to go. Then came the FPV drone operators, specifically a unit known as Achilles, experienced battle-hardened pilots who had spent months perfecting precision strikes. Their mission was clear: hunt down every remaining Russian position inside the city and eliminate it. And to make sure nothing was left to chance, Ukraine's heavy mechanized brigades were placed on standby. They were ready for coordinated night operations the moment they were needed. This wasn't improvised. Every element of this operation had been thought through. Ukraine had spent months laying the groundwork. In January, Ukrainian forces had already made a symbolic move by raising their flag over the city council building. In February, spokesperson Viktor Trihub confirmed that reliable control had been established across key parts of the city. So, when May arrived, Ukraine wasn't starting from scratch. They were finishing what they had already built. The final cleanup operation launched with clinical efficiency. Russian elements were hit from multiple directions simultaneously. The goal was complete encirclement, not just pushing them back, but trapping them so resistance became impossible. According to the Institute for the Study of War, by May, Russia had no consolidated positions left. They could no longer realistically defend or maneuver from inside Kupiansk. The Russian forces were cornered, and then one by one, their last positions were taken out. The most dramatic moment came at the hospital. The Kupiansk Central District Hospital had a final group of approximately 20 Russian soldiers in the basement. They had used the hospital's thick concrete walls and underground passages to create a stubborn defensive position. Cut off from their supply lines and running low on everything, these soldiers were essentially waiting. Ukraine's tactical group faced a difficult decision. This was a hospital with civilian meaning beyond military use, so they didn't just blast the building apart. They first sent reconnaissance drones to map every angle. They identified precise impact points. Then they struck with guided munitions, targeted and deliberate. This was designed to destroy the military threat without turning the entire building into rubble. The Russian group inside was eliminated. The last organized resistance point in Kupiansk's city center was gone. What followed next from Russia's side revealed something important about how badly things had unraveled. With no large units left to commit, Russian commanders switched to something almost desperate: micro-infiltration. Instead of armored convoys, they were now sending in 1 or 2 soldiers at a time. They tried to slip back into the city through forest paths, across the river in small boats. Some even used old industrial pipelines running beneath the Oskol River. The idea was to cause undetected chaos, but Ukraine had anticipated this too. FPV drones equipped with thermal cameras patrolled the approaches around the clock. Operators positioned near pipe entrances waited in silence for the moment a heat signature appeared. Whether crawling through a pipeline or hiding in a tree hollow, the response came within seconds. Kamikaze dives, millimeter-precise strikes. Every infiltration attempt was shut down before it could take hold. The Russian army's back door into Kupiansk was slammed shut. On May 16th, something revealing happened. Russian Chief of Staff Valery Gerasimov stood before Western commanders and made bold claims about Kupiansk. He suggested Russia still had a meaningful presence there, that the situation wasn't as dire as it looked. It was classic information warfare. Deny the loss, control the narrative, keep the pressure off. But drone footage from the ground told a completely different story. Independent analysts picked apart the claims. The gap between Moscow's words and the reality in Kupiansk was wide and obvious. The statement became an embarrassment rather than a strategic communication. The propaganda move landed with a thud. Kiev had turned Russia's Kupiansk ambition into wreckage, and the world could see it clearly. Hey, before we go further, I want to ask you something directly about this coverage. If you've made it this far, you know this channel goes deeper than the headlines. Pause for just a moment and drop a comment below telling me what you think Russia's next move is. And while you're down there, hit subscribe. Every comment and subscriber tells YouTube this content matters. That keeps this channel alive. Now let's keep going, because the story gets even bigger. Now here is where the scale of Russia's loss in Kupiansk starts to become truly staggering. This wasn't just about losing one city. The units committed to Kupiansk were not expendable filler forces. They were among the most capable formations in the Russian military. The 27th Separate Guards Motorized Rifle Brigade. As one of the most trusted combat units, it suffered its heaviest losses in the fighting around Kupiansk. The 121st and 122nd Regiments of the 68th Motorized Rifle Division were also cut off and neutralized. Ukrainian forces severed their logistics at key river crossing points. Ukrainian artillery didn't just push tanks back. It turned their supply routes into graveyards. Column after column of vehicles moving toward the front was destroyed. The 153rd Tank Regiment of the 47th Tank Division lost the majority of its vehicles to FPV drones. This makes the loss difficult for Moscow to recover from. It's not just the men lost. It's the equipment, the institutional knowledge, and the battlefield experience all degraded simultaneously. Replacing tanks takes time. Replacing trained, experienced soldiers who know drone warfare takes even longer. And here's the strategic consequence that changes everything. Moscow counted on the Eastern Front staying manageable. They wanted to shift their northern buildup into a decisive push toward Kiev through Chernihiv. But the manpower lost in Kupiansk had to be replaced. Russia pulled from reserves meant for the north. The 100,000-man shadow army began losing its depth even before it could move. Meanwhile, Ukraine was doing the opposite. Once Kupiansk and surrounding villages were cleared, the operation expanded. Thousands of Ukrainian soldiers who fought through that campaign suddenly became available for redeployment. These weren't fresh troops. They were soldiers who just spent months mastering urban combat and drone coordination. They had operated at night, under pressure, against a determined enemy, and they had won. The Carta National Guard Brigade was now ready to be redirected north, along with other mechanized brigades. Ukraine could bring its defensive strength in the north up to 50,000 to 55,000 troops. This number significantly complicates any Russian offensive ambitions, and those troops weren't arriving at an empty border. Ukraine spent months constructing one of the most impressive defensive architectures seen in this war. A massive fortification line ran 300 kilometers from the Kiev reservoir to Sumy, with lessons from 2022. More than 2,100 reinforced concrete bunkers connected by tunnels formed the backbone of this system. Each bunker was strengthened with special steel structures capable of absorbing sustained artillery bombardment. Over 3,000 kilometers of anti-tank ditches ran along the border zone. Behind them were concrete dragon's teeth. Pyramid-shaped barriers were placed at intervals designed to slow armored vehicles and funnel them into kill zones. Pillboxes were buried for protection, alongside hidden underground ammunition depots between trench lines. Advanced electronic warfare systems deployed up to 100 kilometers deep were designed to blind Russian drones. This isn't a line you breach with momentum. Attacking this requires 3 to 5 times the strength. Russia was planning to do this with a force that has already been bled in the east. They lost elite units and armored capacity and now face an opposing force of battle-hardened veterans. The math doesn't work in Moscow's favor. There's one more layer that cannot be overlooked. On May 20th, President Zelensky convened a critical intelligence meeting about Russian movements along the border. 5 different military scenarios for advancing on Kiev through Chernihiv had been identified and confirmed. Russia also began joint nuclear exercises with Belarus to apply psychological pressure and draw Minsk in. These moves were being monitored in real time. Every phone call and satellite movement was tracked. General Oleksandr Syrski stated the northern threat was realistic and preparations were being made accordingly. Ukraine was absorbing the danger and positioning itself to meet it from a position of strength. In 2022, Ukraine was reacting. Now Ukraine is anticipating, setting conditions, and choosing the ground. Kupiansk was a strategic signal. We see your plan, and we will not wait for you to move. Russia's image of military invincibility was dismantled at precisely the moment they needed those forces intact. Putin's vision of reaching Kiev required the eastern front to hold and the northern buildup to remain secret. Kupiansk denied him both. The eastern front didn't hold, and the reserves were bled dry. Before I give you my final thoughts, I want to do something a little different. Share this. Genuinely send this to someone in a group chat who's been trying to understand the war. Real sharing is how honest analysis reaches people. Let's make sure this story gets heard. The forest path to Kiev is closed by planning, patience, and a military that learns from every mistake. The Shadow Army has lost its shadow. Russia is running out of elite manpower and fresh armor. One city changed the math of this entire war. Kupiansk stopped Putin's most dangerous northern dream. It happened hundreds of miles away in a city by a river where Ukraine chose the right moment to strike.